many people feel a little bit conflicted between life in Crown Heights and life on Shlichus. There's confusion there. In fact, there are even some shluchim who actually believe that shlichus is an emergency measure. You can't let Jews get lost. There are Jews who Pashut want to know. So as an emergency, you go and you do shlichus. But that's not Chassidus. That's Avos Yisrael. And what's going to happen? When the emergency is over, then we'll go back to being Chassidim or practicing Chassidus. That's not a very nice thing to say. But something in the atmosphere gives that impression that unless you are a chassid like the Rebbe Rashab's chassidim, you're not a real chassid. Real chassidim, not even by the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe's chassidim, Nebuch, they were busy fighting for their life. The real chassidim were the Rebbe Rashab's chassidim. To daven for hours, to learn long Maimorim, Hamsheichim, the Rambam of Chassidus. Those were the days when Chassidim were real Chassidim. On the other hand, could very well be that all that davening and all that learning was a hachana for what we need to do today, that we should be able to do it successfully. This is real Chassidus. That was Hechsher Mitzvah. That was just a hachana. So, in practical terms, when people come to Crown Heights from a Chabad house, do they experience a kind of a culture shock? Chabad house has a certain atmosphere, a certain ruach, come to Crown Heights and it's a different ruach. And they're a little disoriented, like, what's going on? Like one woman from Beis Chana who came to Crown Heights. Years later, I met her here, and she says, now I'm really a chassid. What you were telling us was just whatever, introductory. Now, this is real chassidus. Is that true? Because if that's true, we have two problems. One is that Shlichus has to become a little more like Crown Heights. Shlichus has to mean that the people who come to your Chabad house should be saying Chitas. Isn't that Shlichus? It's enough that they don't drive on Shabbos. Hafotzas Hamayonis means you have to bring Chassidus to the people. So if you're a Chassid by virtue of Chitas, why aren't your Balabatim saying Chitas? Or for them it's enough just to keep Shabbos? For them it's enough if they put on tefillin when you ask them once a week. They're not supposed to have their own tefillin. So maybe Shlichus has to become more like Crown Heights. On the other hand, maybe Crown Heights has to become a little more like Shlichus, where everybody is living to serve others. Yeah. Maybe both things are true. But certainly, Crown Heights has to be, it has to be a Chabad house. You can't have two Rebbes. So, is the Lubavitcher Rebbe the Rebbe of Chabad houses and Shlichus, or is he the Rebbe of Crown Heights? Can't have two Rebbes. So if Shlichus has to become more like Crown Heights, then it should happen. And if Crown Heights has to become more like a Shlichus, then that should happen too. But there's got to be one Rebbe. Coming from Shlichus, I would vote that Crown Heights become a big Chabad house. A Chabad house with many volunteers. But it should feel like a Chabad house. And some people have that experience. Many people have that experience. They come to Crown Heights and they'll say exactly the same thing that they would say after being at a Chabad house. I felt so welcomed, nobody judged me, it was as if I belonged there. Beautiful. Some people don't have that experience. I'm not ready for this, I can't be so religious, I can't be so chassidish, it's a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. So you have different reactions from different people. But I think that it's inevitable. It's inevitable. If we're not an outreach, if we're not a Chabad house, it can't last. The koyach that we have today, we get from the Rebbe. The Rebbe didn't give us koyach to be the Rebbe Rashab's Chassidim. For that you need koyach. People who sat under their talis for 6 hours a day, every day, and didn't go insane, they should have. But they didn't, because the Rebbe Rashab gave them inner koyches to be able to do Aveda Pnimis. If the Rebbe is not giving you that koyach, and you try it on your own, you are going to go crazy. What are you doing under the talis for 6 hours? I don't want to know. So what do we have koyach? What is the Rebbe giving us ability to do? To inspire others and thereby be inspired ourselves. So we have no choice. We have to do it that way. It's the only access to Elokus that is available to us today. And you can see those who are devoted to Miftzayim, those who are devoted to Hachnosas Orchim, those who welcome people into their homes, they're alive. Those who are trying to improve themselves, either they do or they don't, it's a little iffy. So what can we do to make Crown Heights more of a Chabad house? And it's got to be better than any Chabad house, because in a Chabad house, there's the official shliach who is responsible. Here, nobody is official, nobody is responsible. Everybody has to volunteer and do it on their own. But at least the energy in the street should feel like a Chabad house. All the time, not just sometime. back in the 70s, when the world was a little crazy, and women would come to Beis Chana in Minnesota, and after a week, a month, off to Crown Heights. It was like wholesale. Next step, Crown Heights. Nussi Garari had the Chabad house in Buffalo. He would come into the Pegisha. There was a men's Pegisha and a women's Pegisha. He would come into the women's Pegisha, and at the end, Sunday morning, he would get up. These are women who were here only for a weekend. And for many of them, it's their first weekend. He would get up and say that Mr. Pfeffer Corn, who didn't exist, Mr. Pfeffer Corn made a fund. He's paying tickets for anyone who wants to go to Minnesota, to Beis Chana. I don't know where he got the money from, but he did. And amazingly, I would go back to Minnesota with 9 women, 15 women, depending on the year. They came for a weekend. On the spur of the moment, they decide to go to Minnesota for a month. In those days, that was like normal. Nobody had a job, nobody went to school. Yeah, go there for a month? Sure. They never asked, where do we stay? Where do we eat? Nobody asked. They went, little knapsack, that's it, big onion. And then after a month, back to Crown Heights. What was in Crown Heights? For them, nothing. This was before Machon Chana. So what did they do? They would sit in classes at Beis Rivka with the 9-year-olds, learning Aleph Beis, learning to read. On the one hand, it was beautiful. On the other hand, it was a little pitiful that they have to sit there with babies. But it was amazing, amazing. That revolution, that whole 60s craziness, trying to find yourself, you don't know what you're looking for, but you go looking anyway, that whole thing, the Rebbe instigated. And you can find it in a mimer that the Rebbe said in 1960, Tafshin Chav, where the Rebbe says that it says in Shir HaShirim that the Eibishter doesn't take no for an answer. Deidi sholach yodei min achur. He breaks down the door and inspires. So the Rebbe said, what happens when the Eibishter reaches out, people develop a hunger and they don't know for what. And they go looking and they don't even know what they're looking for. That was the 60s. So the Rebbe once said that these people who came in those years, they were very heiche neshamas. They were pioneers. They opened the path, they opened the gate for the more conventional people to do a more conventional tshuva without, picking up a bag and going off someplace, but in their own lives, in their own homes, in their own workspace, they introduced mitzvahs and they took their Yiddishkeit seriously, and they became the moderate Baalei Tshuva. But from the beginning, it was obvious you can't inspire somebody in this world today, even back in the 70s. You couldn't inspire them by talking about their grandparents, because their grandparents were already not from. So you couldn't say, What are you going to drop everything your grandfather stood for? Their grandfather was on the beach on Yom Kippur. You couldn't use nostalgia. It was gone. So they would come, they didn't know for what, and they would sit there. Inspire me. What do you say? What can you say? Whatever you would say, they would, okay, fine, but I don't need that. Oh, it's beautiful, beautiful. I don't need that. Like, good for you. Enjoy. Enjoy being frum. I don't need that. So it was so obvious. We taka don't need that. We're here to serve him. And it's amazing when you say this to somebody today, the effect that that has. It's like a breath of fresh air. You mean it's not about me? Tell me more. Because everything and everybody, it's about you and how do you feel now? And how do you like me now? And where is the safe room where I could go if I'm feeling a little... You come to people and say, never mind. Never mind what you need. The Eibishter is waiting for you to do something for him. Like, why didn't somebody tell me this years ago? Would have saved me so much grief. I was talking to a well-known psychiatrist from Eretz Yisrael. I mentioned this. She was completely overwhelmed. And this goes against everything she was trained to do. But it's so obvious that today you can't go digging inside because it's not there. The truth is not inside. So if you go inside, all you're going to find is a mess. Confusion and needs and conflicts, which psychiatrists make a fortune on. But that's not where it's at. People today are deeply inspired by the opportunity to serve outside of themselves. If it also happens to be the purpose for which they were created, that doesn't hurt either. That's the attitude that makes a Chabad house. Why are we so accepting and non-judgmental? Godless Hamichin? We're so wise, we're so profound that we don't judge people, and we're so big and generous. No, we're not. Why are we non-judgmental? Because we're aware of something much bigger. When you have your eye on the goal, you don't get distracted so easily. Just had an experience. This guy comes, I was in California, comes to talk to me. He looks weird, and he says, I don't even know why I'm talking to you. My mother begged me to come, so I'm here, but you have nothing to say to me. I said, give me a chance, maybe. What's the story? He's gay. He used to be Orthodox, but when he came to New York, to the Frum community, wherever he went, I don't know where it was, they were so judgmental. They were so critical of him that he hates them, he hates Yiddishkeit, he stopped keeping Shabbos, he doesn't keep kosher anymore, he doesn't want to hear from it, he's done. But he seemed like a really nice guy. So we talked. I said to him, you know, maybe you're the one who's judgmental. What did you do? You walked into a frum community and you said, I'm gay and you better accept me. What kind of mishigas is that? What are you doing? And now you're sitting in judgment over them. You provoked them. And now you're critical of them. You're so judgmental. And he said, yeah, I guess. I did that. I said, so tell me something. Are you gay or are you militant? He says, what do you mean? I said, are you really gay? He says, yes. I said, really? Yeah. I said, so find a nice guy and get married. What are you marching around the streets protesting? If that's who you are, then be it. Stop with the militant. He said, oh, I wasn't expecting that. We talked some more, and this was before Purim. So as he's getting up to leave, I said to him, oh, by the way, we're reading the Megillah here tomorrow night. You want to come? He says, oh, I have an appointment. Oh, you know what? I'll cancel it. Do you hear what just happened? He walked in convinced that he doesn't believe in anything, he doesn't want anything. An hour and a half later, oh, you're reading the Megillah? Okay, I'll cancel my appointment. I'll come. If you get past the individual shtick, in an hour and a half, his Yiddishkeit is back. If we could make this a little bit of an agenda, a little bit of a Crown Heights has to behave like a Chabad house. Every storekeeper, somebody walks in, you're the Chabad shliach. I mean, sell them your product, but don't stop at that. Be a Chabad house. I'm not sure exactly how this can happen, but that it needs to happen, I'm really sure. You can't have two Rebbes. You have somebody come all excited about the Rebbe, all excited about Chassidus, and walk into Crown Heights and say, whoa, 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 this is a different Rebbe. So I guess we need a little more uniformity, a little more consistency. It's not like, you know, there's a Chassidus for out of town, but then there's Chassidus for in town. We can't have that. Recently, the mashpiyim in the yeshivas have been talking about the fact that a bacha, until recently, is raised on the Maimorim of the Rebbe Rashab. Right? What does a bacha learn? Start off with Kuntas Amayim, Rebbe Rashab. Then you go to Samach Hey, then Samach Vav, then Ayin Beis. And that's your diet. In your spare time, you read a Sikha. The Rebbe's Maimer. Just like about a year ago, the Mashpiyim in Chabad here are starting to say, maybe we should be learning the Rebbe's Maimer. In Tomchit Mimin in Lubavitch, they learned the Rebbe Rashab's Maimer. Guess why? Because he was the Rebbe. Why aren't we learning the Rebbe's Maimer? Not in your spare time. It would be a blessing to the people who come to Crown Heights, and it would be a blessing to the people who live in Crown Heights. It would create a whole new optimism, a whole new simcha for everybody. So this is the punchline. The punchline is, it's not about what kind of a chassid you are. That's the Rebbe Rashab's issue. The question today is, how available are you to what the Rebbe wants or what the Eibishter wants? Because it's about him now. If the focus was on that, we would naturally all be a Chabad house. So people growing up in Crown Heights, going on shlichus, will find it seamless. It's not like a change all of a sudden. And people coming from the outside, walking into Crown Heights, will find it consistent, because there's one Rebbe, and this is what the Rebbe stood for. This is what the Rebbe wants. I think that's part of the beauty of it. There is no one shliach. There's no head shliach in Crown Heights, which is a good thing. It's a totally merit-based. Everybody does what they can. Why should it be that wherever there's a heavy concentration of chassidim, all of a sudden it's not a Chabad house? Why is that? You know the old joke about fertilizer. Why is it like that? Because we start to turn inwards. So who's a bigger chassid, me or you? What kind of chassid are you? Is that what happens? That shouldn't happen. Not in the Rebbe's generation. Chaim.
Hi.